This is the Team Objection podcast for August 2020, episode 449. And like we did a few episodes ago, I mean, hell, it's probably a couple months ago at this point, we're going to have the chance to go back into a game that we already talked about to some extent, but a new person has gone through it, and now we can kind of update our thoughts, get their ideas. But before we let Dave have the floor, because, fuck Dave, I have something I want to bring up. I didn't tell him about this before the show, so I want you to be prepared to watch the reactions if you're on YouTube, or hear them if you're doing the other way. I want to talk. Okay, yeah, spit take your protein shake. I want to talk about baseball. I know. I see, that was fun. I had a feeling it would be good. Just for a minute.
There's actually one thing I do want to talk about baseball.
Okay.
But go ahead.
Is it their completely failed coronavirus testing protocol?
Yep.
And measures? I want to talk specifically about something that happened last night, just real quick, as an example of, yes, we're all NBA fans, so obviously we're biased towards basketball before other sports, but last night it was 10-3 in a game, and the Padres had the bases loaded, and the hitter at the plate was Fernando Tatis Jr., who was a promising young star, the son of a former player of some renown. And on a 3-0 count, which of course means he's one pitch away from walking, he never looked over to third base to get his sign, swung and hit a grand slam. His second home run of the game, his league-leading 11th. He passed Mike Trout for the MLB lead in home runs. And then the baseball rules police came along, specifically the unspoken rules. And I just want you to imagine a scenario, to put it in terms of like basketball. I mean, Dave, I know you know baseball, but imagine if basketball had all these things in place that you couldn't do or were supposed to do, but they're not actually in the rules, and nobody can agree on them, but they just existed. This was the latest and dumbest example of that, because he got grief not only from the opposing team's manager, but his own manager about hitting a grand slam in a game that they were up 7 in the 8th inning.
So here's, the funny thing, the thing I've always found craziest about these unwritten rules of baseball and not showing people up and playing the game right, as they say. This is, I'd say his action is the equivalent of the shot clock running down in basketball when you're up by 25 with a minute left, with like 15 seconds left, and the game is over. And so, but you decide to shoot the 3 anyway, and you make it. And well, no one's really going to be that mad at you, but it's like, should you let the shot clock run out? Probably. But in this case, baseball has no clock. Theoretically, a team can come back from any deficit at any time. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of weird that these rules exist in baseball, in the one sport where there's, literally a possibility to come back no matter how much time is left in the game.
Isn't it weird that you're supposed to win until you're not anymore?
Yeah.
And there are certain things you shouldn't be doing in those scenarios. You're not supposed to be like stealing bases. You're certainly not supposed to like slide hard into second to break up a double play, something that could risk injury. I mean, I get some of those. This one, though, teams have come back from 7-run deficits in 2 innings before. It's not common. I bet you the win probability is like 96 or higher in that case. But the chance exists, and you're basically asking a player to hurt himself for this unspoken rule. And again, after he takes that fastball down the middle that he's supposed to quote-unquote take, then he's allowed to home run on the next pitch? Because he's not supposed to take 3-1. That's not one of the unwritten rules. If he's 3-1, then it's expected. Then he gets to swing at a strike. And it's like, what are we doing? And keep in mind, the Rangers were the recipients of this beatdown. They beat the Orioles 30-3 in a game like 4 or 5 years ago. 30-3. And now they're out here bitching about this? Like, get the fuck out of here with your unwritten rules.
Yeah, I've actually softened on this a lot because I'm a sore loser, and so my initial gut reaction is like, no, you don't rub it in, you don't shoot that 3, you don't hit the run, and now I'm like, I've learned that it's more important, like, if you're an NBA player, I'm fine with running another play, a good play, get a good shot, work on whatever. Like, that's still the opportunity. If you're winning, you're no longer playing for the victory necessarily, but there are still things you can work on and get better at. And, it's the same, like, with baseball. He's working on the hit, he's working on his year percentage and all of that. So, like, why? Doesn't make any sense.
Well, and baseball is so weird too, and I guess maybe they have these rules because you can't put the scrubs in per se. You can't sub out because then they're not in the game anymore, and you can't put them back in. But like, I don't know. There's just so many problems with this. Oh, like everyone got mad at a guy named Joey Batista a few years ago for hitting a game-winning home run in a playoff series and throwing his bat up in the air. I thought it was one of the coolest moments in baseball, and everyone hated him and like he was going to get thrown at the next season, like get a baseball thrown at his head the next season.
And then
because he
Roughness
celebrated
Odor
walk-off.
punched him out at second base.
Yeah,
I don't remember if it was the same season or I guess it was the following, the regular season. Like I actually clocked him in a game because of that. Yeah.
To be fair, that was one of the best in-game punches I've ever seen. He
And-
clocked him.
And like it was an exuberant celebration. It goes against the old guard of baseball, but I agree. I mean, it wasn't the game winner. It put him ahead in like the 8th inning of a critical playoff game after a very tense top half of that inning, by the way, where they had to stop the game because fans were throwing stuff in disagreement with the call. So tensions were already way high before he hit that 3-run homer and then tossed his bat into the moon.
It reminds me of like golf, though. You're not really supposed to celebrate in golf either, and it's like way too. I mean, I'm never gonna watch golf, but if there was a way I was gonna do it, it's gonna be when the players actually seem excited. Like if you don't seem excited for a great hit, why would I be excited?
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't give a shit. So, and yeah, they wrote a movie on this. I don't know if you guys have seen it. It's called Billy Madison. No. Yes. Billy Madison is the one where he's a kid. Happy Gilmore.
Happy
Happy
Gilmore.
Gilmore. Happy Gilmore. I got there.
Now I will agree at lower levels, not the professional level, there is a little bit more of don't show them up because the talent disparity can be so vast at lower levels like high school, even college to an extent. Like, yeah, maybe don't do that type of stuff when you're winning by a lot. But in the pro level, if you don't like it, beat them. Like you guys, the talent gap is not that big. If you don't
The
like
only
it,
time and this is gonna be weird, is in softball. I don't mind if you keep hitting and you're just good at hitting and you keep doing it. Like I'm not expecting you to take a strike or strike out. What annoys me is when you get a pitcher who's maybe not great and they're throwing it like okay, but not a strike, and they just sit there and they just walk.
yeah,
And they just walk, and the score's like 50-0, and they're fine with that. And it's like at some point, like, don't you want to have fun?
Mhm.
Like, you're just so concerned with only winning in a softball league. I don't know, but otherwise, it's like you play the game to play it. I mean, don't kill yourself if you're super ahead, but like, oh, it's not your fault. This other team is having a bad outing.
The dumbest part of all this, by the way, is that the bases were only loaded because the Rangers fucked up. Okay, they employed a heavy shift, and the guy hit a little dribbler down the third base line, got an infield hit, walked the second guy, walked the third guy after an 0-2 count on pitches that weren't close, and then fell behind 3-0 to the batter. So why is he at fault for taking a swing in a game where they're only up by 7? If it's 21-0, fine. Don't swing at a 3-0 pitch. But to me, it's like until you've gotten to the point where the team has just given up, you don't stop. You don't stop playing until the game is over. And then if you want to give them some condolences about how bad they played, so be it.
yeah.
This is why, to me, it's really between football and baseball as the worst league in America. Baseball sucks. Football also sucks, and they also can't seem to like discipline their players in any way that is meaningful.
Yeah.
Or all the thing with the kneeling and all of that. Like the NBA has just shown time and time again that they're like with the players, and it hasn't always been popular. I know the kneeling now, I would say it's funny because I talk to family, they're like, oh, they just want to be a part of something. They don't really mean it. And I was like, I just don't buy that because it's not helping them do this. They're not getting endorsements for kneeling. They're not making money. Like if anything, it's hurting their bottom line. It just doesn't make sense to me, but the NBA has their players back, and that's where that's why it's the best league in the world. I don't know about the Euro soccer leagues. Maybe there's a soccer league that's really good, but NBA is great.
Well, yeah, it's why I haven't watched a single moment of baseball this year, and that has nothing to do with the fact of their coronavirus testing is horrifically bad, and their protocol's terrible, and I'm surprised they're still actually playing.
We're not going to get a World Series.
I don't think so.
No way.
I think we will.
No way.
That's pretty stubborn on their part.
Here's how we get a World Series. If there's only 2 teams left after all the virus because it's wiped out every other team, and they're like, well, here it is. Let's just play it really quick and give out the trophy.
Most
doesn't
teams have
affect more
played.
than-
Most teams have played like 22 to 25 games to this point. St. Louis has played, I think, 9.
Good
So when
lord.
you look at the standings, you have a team. At least a few weeks ago, at the very least, I remember looking before the Cardinals got to resume play, and they were 2-3, and the Cubs were in first at 11-3, and it just looks extremely strange. There's always some variance in the standings, right? And we saw this in basketball with the resumption of play. Not everybody played the same amount of games, but they were close. This was one where you're like, so they're tied in the loss column, and Chicago's up 9 in the win column, and they played 14 games. What are we doing?
They're up 4.5 games back in the standing. I don't know. It's too hard to calculate.
So, yeah, not that I'm trying to pile on baseball, but just this in particular reminded me, it's like, this is one of those reasons where I find watching baseball not during the playoffs to be just this soulless, joyless experience. At least during the playoffs, you can understand the importance of each at bat, but when you're watching somebody grind out an 11-pitch at bat in the 4.5 hour mark of a regular season game that's still in the 8th inning, you're like, what am I doing? Why am I watching this?
161 others of these, and it's just it's too much.
People complain about NBA and NHL having too long of seasons, and I'm like, maybe, but I look at baseball and it's twice as long a season, and I go, it ain't that bad.
Do you know what it was for me in baseball? And I'll never forget this. I don't remember who's playing, but I remember the sensation of there's a close game. I was really rooting. It must have been the Diamondbacks. They're the only team I ever cared about. I'm rooting for them so hard. They lose, and it's like no one cares. They're like, whatever. And they just like took the field, and the announcers didn't care. No one cared about anything happening. And it bothered me so much. In the NBA, you get people there. Oh yeah, football. I don't want to just say, like, any sport, you can see how invested they are, how much they care if they win or lose. And I don't get that from baseball. And that you reminded me of that, Chris, when you're like, it's just like, it's almost like perfunctory. It's almost like transactions happening on the field. There's no passion. It's completely soulless. And I really feel that. And that's why I could never get behind it. Except in the World Series between, I'm sure a lot of them, but the Diamondbacks in New York, that was great. That was a different level where they cared.
Yeah.
I was like, if they're only going to care in the playoffs, then I'm only going to care in the playoffs.
Which is like the biggest complaint against basketball too, but whatever.
It is?
A lot of people say that. People don't care about the regular season. Like, I mean, look at Kawhi sitting out of games, sitting out of half the games of the season basically, and then playing all the playoff games. Like, people point at that. I don't fully agree with it.
I mean, sure, but like when he's playing, they want to win. I really feel like maybe it wasn't always like this, but in the modern day NBA, when the players go out, they want to win. And whether it's because they want the next big contract, they want to get paid, they want to win for the integrity of the game, they want to support their team, like whatever it is, like I feel like they're trying. Yeah. Even load management, like I don't love it, but I understand it, and I don't think it means that they don't care.
Yeah.
I think it means they care a lot, and they want to maintain themselves for the stuff that really matters.
So it wasn't really a deep dive baseball topic, but I saw that this morning when I was scrolling through my news feed, and I was just looking at some of the replies to it. Luckily, most people are like, God, baseball is such a killjoy. Shut the hell up. The most baffling part was his own manager throwing him under the bus. Like the opposing manager getting all butthurt, fine, pretty standard for baseball. But his own manager throwing him under the bus, I was just like, man, no wonder nobody likes you. You're a bunch of idiots. So anyways, that's the baseball talk. That's the first time we've talked about baseball this year, probably the last. Let's move on to another thing that Dave wanted to segue into, and I want to give him the opportunity, even though he has nothing to segue off of now. Let's see what he has.
Okay. It's all right, guys. I have a plan for this show. Just have a bit of goddamn faith, Arthur. I mean, John. Just we need money.
It was pretty good. You got to really your voice has to break more.
That's true. I have a plan.
I have a plan. He's the worst character.
The amount of times I've heard that. For some reason, Dutch's voice just endears me so much. I love that voice.
I love that, and how many times he calls out Arthur for being sarcastic. Those like the two things. That's it. That's all his dialogue in the whole game.
Yeah.
I have a plan. Don't worry so much. Or like bemoaning that he has no one's faith in the group. And it's like, well, there's a reason for that. You're a psychopath.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. This game, Red Dead Redemption 2, I really liked 1 a lot. I thought it was well done overall. 2 takes everything that 1 did and just ramps it up, I think, is like the best way I can describe it. So much more life and depth of characters, bigger story, and you feel so immersed in that world. Just so much so. That's kind of like the way I almost want to start it out is like when you're playing this game, it's so easy to feel as if you are in late 1800s Old West type of thing. You're riding a horse, you got to take care of your horse. There's, people that you will ride by that you hear their conversations as you go by. It's obviously not perfect, but man, it feels immersive as much as can be from a game you're watching on your TV.
I think it's probably the 2's biggest advantage over 1, and that's coming from somebody who likes 1 more than 2, is that immersion. It feels like 1 is a series of set pieces, and it's a decent-sized world and whatnot, but it doesn't really feel alive. It's just kind of like what's happening in this bubble with John Marston, whereas in 2, everything that's around Arthur, whether it has anything to do with him or not, makes the whole world feel enriched in a way that 1 simply does not have.
Well, it's stuff like you feel this sense of community almost that obviously wasn't there in 1 because 1 was more of a Lone Ranger type of deal where he had to go do everything on his own and partner up with corrupt people again and again, essentially. But 1, you've got your group of people and you walk around your camp and you hear their conversations and then you walk by them and try to listen on their conversation. They look over at you like, can you not? Like, walk away, please. Which is such a weird thing that you're writing dialogue to essentially not be heard almost, just to make that feeling more immersive, which is crazy.
Did you love the walk away, Black Lung?
Yeah. Just walk
Is your
away,
favorite
Black.
character, Micah?
Oh my God. I'll get in. I'd probably talk about the main characters, kind of do a mini little breakdown of them, but fuck Micah. That's what I have to say about that, because just evil to be evil for the most part.
I mean, you should essentially just talk about whatever you want to talk about. We're not going to go a full beat for beat, like characters, plot, story, music, whatever type review, but it's more about your impressions, having been late to the party, but also having just played 1 and going into 2, which is an experience that Shaun and I did not have.
So I liked 2 more. Chris liked 1 more. Where do you fall?
I probably like 2 more. And it was interesting when I played through this because I really like John Marston as a character a lot. Like, thought he was in 1, he was a character with depth, a little bit of the turn on what you expect this like lawless outlaw to be, because he was an outlaw, but he was trying to do things right, but he had to kind of go back to his outlaw ways every once in a while. So he had this depth when all he really wanted was his family back in his house and to rustle cattle, basically. That's all he wanted to do. So I like the depth of him. Arthur, his path through this game, his growth, his emotions, all the things that see the character changes this game goes on, blows John Marston away as far as that goes. And it was weird because I heard you guys talking when I first started playing this game, like, I don't know, I might like Arthur more than John. I was like, really? How is that possible? Arthur's just kind of a dick. And throughout the game, I was like, okay, I like you a lot, Arthur. Like, you learned something. It took a debilitating, deadly disease to make it happen, but you learned something, which was amazing.
They're both similar. They both start out a little bit dry.
Yeah.
And over time, you kind of grow to like them. I do think that Arthur's depth, I don't want to say trounces John's, but is definitely a lot more nuanced in a lot of ways. And I think a lot more satisfying, even though the end is kind of, saccharine sweet. But yeah, I think that's one of the common unifiers there, is that a lot of the characters have depth, and it's not even just the protagonists, but quite a few of the people around you also you can kind of see changing and reacting to what's around them in a way that I don't feel like Rockstar accomplishes in Grand Theft Auto almost ever.
No.
I think the fact that you have a core group of people that all have a bit of a backstory, they all have their own thoughts, their feelings, they're consistent in, I mean, you have someone, I want to say her name was Mary Beth, where you just sit down and talk to her. And she would just listen. She's like your little therapist in there. And she'd be like, Arthur, how are you feeling? And he's like, I've been killing more people than I should lately. And she kind of, I don't know, helps him out from a psychological standpoint. Tilly was like this, I always felt she was kind of this innocent type of girl that they picked up. Miss Grimshaw's the mom of the group. They all have these own roles and personalities of this group. And it gives it so much depth. And so when one of them dies or one of them leaves the group or you lose them, you feel something for it. And Grand Theft Auto, you're all a Lone Ranger. Even in 5, when you had your core 3 players, you're still doing things on your own, as opposed to this where you have a group of people.
What was the death you cared about the most?
The most? I mean, besides Arthur's?
Yeah, of course.
I felt Kieran, I think, was probably the one I felt the worst for.
Yeah.
The guy that came from the O'Driscoll gang, he was in the other gang, and I got the feeling he didn't want to be, and then was actually really helpful for your gang.
Did he get sniped?
He got his head cut off and put on a stick, basically, and brought back into camp.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that was Shaun, I think, was the one that got sniped.
Oh yeah. The Lenny one too was really.
Lenny was rough.
The ones I think are best is when I get movies have to do this, but when it just comes out and they turn around a wrong corner and it's like boom, and that's it, because I don't need my art to imitate life, but that's what happens. It doesn't need to be this big sacrificial whatever. It's like boom, you're dead. These are guns, so it doesn't take a lot.
That was both Lenny and Hosea, both, because Hosea sucked too. I liked Hosea a lot.
Yeah,
he seemed
was great.
So that was the thing. All these characters you feel something for, and when one of them dies, you don't be like, lost character, who cares? No, it's like, oh shit, that sucks. He's not going to be around anymore.
Yeah, Hosea was the Murtaugh of the he's one day from retirement. He's so close, he's gonna leave and never made it.
This is the last job, I promise. It's sort of like what Dutch is promising to a much, much smaller degree. This is the last one for sure. Then I'm done. I'm out. You guys can do whatever. And then it doesn't happen.
Besides the depth of the characters, one of the best things this game does, I think, is really moves the plot along and does such a fantastic job of filling in Dutch's drift into insanity. It's referenced so much in Red Dead 1, where it's John kept saying, yep, Dutch went crazy. Dutch went crazy. We were all with him till Dutch went crazy. And you're like, what do you mean went crazy? Did he hit his head and wasn't the same person anymore? What happened? And it wasn't one singular event, which is why I love this plot so much. It was a series of poor decisions, of people questioning him. It was a series of events that caused him to slowly go insane and only listen to basically his worst enemy, Micah, who's ratting him out to the feds.
Yeah.
Which is such a great plot twist. Oh yeah, spoilers in this one, by the way, folks who are listening. I
mean, we already said Arthur died 4 minutes ago, but sure.
Yeah.
But it's such a great plot twist that Micah's the one being the informant after he shot his former lover, basically, or had his former lover shot because she was lying, saying that she gave him up to the cops. There's so many different plot twists, such a great degradation of the gang in a way that a prequel has to go, because it's going to go poorly for them. And the way they have this slow descent, instead of everything's humming along, everything's going great, boom, we fell off a cliff. No, you see the slow descent.
I think it's so moving and poignant because they take it. I feel like a prequel, there's a certain bravery that a prequel allows. And if you're just creating a game, you're like, oh man, it would be really cool if the gang totally fell apart. But, we want to keep players happy. This is a prequel. We know what's going to happen. And so you have carte blanche to make it as agonizing as possible. And I've seen a few different stories do that. And Red Dead 2 was one of them. And I was like, that's really good.
Yeah. It had a bit of Revenge of the Sith type of feel for it, where it's that, when people start dying, things start falling apart, the gang's, in a cave basically with no food or anything. It has that feeling of descent, or oh man, we screwed up so bad. It's when Anakin starts killing all the younglings. It's okay, there's no return from this. Everybody's fucked.
Yeah.
That type of feeling. That's the feeling I got for it, which I think they do such a good job of that being an emotional movement. So, gameplay overall, is it pretty similar to Red Dead 1, I think. Just actually playing the game, the horse mechanics are the same. I like the depth of the horse bonding that you have, I think, which gives that very touching scene towards the end, obviously, if you fully bond with your horse. And overall, this is one of those games that I feel like I could have this game set on as easy difficulty as possible. Like I could just one shot every person basically and have one guard at every tower type of thing, and I'd still enjoy it because the gameplay was that good. I don't need the gameplay to be difficult to enjoy this one.
Yeah, I totally agree, and it was not a very hard game, and I like that about it, because so much of the stuff that I thought I wasn't gonna like carving out, like the really monotonous stuff, carving your bullets so they do more damage, and sipping your coffee one sip by sip in the morning. You don't have to do any of that, and that was the big difference maker for me. Is you brought up, Dave, that it got like polarizing reviews. Like, I mean, most everybody loved it, but then like if you don't love it, you hate it. And I think it's really because of that. People, they just don't want to buy into that level. And it's like, well, that's not really fair because you don't have to. That is all optional. Pretty much everything but the travel, which does sort of, that might be the biggest sticking point. Everything else is optional. You want to do it and really buy into the world, you can. If you don't have to.
I think they did a good job of addressing that travel issue, though, eventually. Like, once you upgrade your camp enough, you can fast travel from pretty much anywhere. And as soon as and really, I think if you follow the progression of the ability to get cash, you follow the progression of the game, it's not that late in the game, and the map isn't that big when you gain that ability. The map gets huge eventually, obviously. Like, I cannot believe how much terrain is in that game, how much just land, square mileage, I guess you can say, is in this game that you have to cover. So, but at the point where you finally get to be able to fast travel, it's not that bad. I don't think it's that bad. So I think it's a complaint, because there was a couple times where I was like, oh my God, I have to ride how far?
Yeah.
Ugh, okay.
This is not a slight, Dave, I promise. But I want to bring it up because it meant so much when I was talking to you about the moment where he got tuberculosis.
Mm-hmm.
And like it's the little stuff like that. Like, they never say it, and I think it's so well done. Is like he gets coughed on. He seems to not be happy about it when it happens, but then like it's not mentioned again until hours later when he starts to develop a cough, and you can try to chase it back. I have a theory that there's another example of that. And it's funny because you talked about, like, you were just throwing out an example. You were like, did Dutch like hit his head? There's a moment where he gets brained by like a piece of wood or something. And I think it's reductive to say he was fine and they got hit in the head and that's what made him crazy. But I really do see it as like he's starting to descend, and the getting his head bashed in just kind of like gives him like the little push, like over the edge. Like something kind of changed in him, and you can, at least to me, you can kind of track. He starts getting a lot more extreme from that moment. Like it's exponential. And is it just everything's getting to him? Is it he kind of did some brain damage? Is it a mix of the two? I don't know, and they never said, but I think it's really fascinating.
Yeah, he's a character with a lot of depth and charisma too, which I thought his character was crazy about. Dutch, the character, like he had a lot of charisma. You can kind of see why people follow him in the beginning, at least.
It's a very reductive comparison, but what it reminded me of a little bit, in a small way, just all these caveats up front, is Captain Hammer from Dr. Horrible's sing-along blog. In the sense of Captain Hammer's this big superhero, everything's going great, he does whatever he wants, he's kind of an asshole, and then he feels pain for the first time and he has an absolute fucking breakdown. It's like that with Dutch, where it's like, as long as everybody else around him is like getting killed or hurt, it doesn't really matter so much. Like, he's still the architect, the brains behind all the operations, who's going to hold this fucking family together. And then something happens to him, and that's what, like you said, is like the last step. He's already sort of heading that way, but then something happens to him directly. He's like, all right, that's it. I don't care anymore. I'm off the deep end.
Well, and you can do that physically or like emotionally, because he lost somebody to the rival gang. It's been a while now.
Mm-hmm.
And like, these are things that really start taking a toll, and you can see it. Like, he is going crazy. He is going crazy.
Yeah.
Did you get to the scene with the horse?
Yeah. Yes. The scene. There's that touching scene with the horse at the end when, you're under siege from the U.S. Army, essentially. Not exactly the Army, but yeah, but you're under siege, and you take this moment, which is in the moment, it felt almost bad where like the horse gets hit by a bullet and you kind of get thrown off, and Arthur turns around and John's screaming at him, let's go, let's go. And Arthur takes a moment to bend over and pet him and calm him and say thank you. And the sad part is a part of me was like, no, go, you gotta move, like you're being shot.
No, fuck that, because if you're Arthur, you're like, that was my best friend, and I'm dead anyway. Like, this thing is going to kill me. So, yeah, you know what, John? You go ahead. I am going to take a couple seconds here while my best friend is dying in my arms to be like, thank you. Thank you for your service to me. I put you through way too much in this game. All the stupid hunting and, like, falling off cliffs on accident. Yeah, thank you.
I feel like my horse I had a full bond with my horse, but I feel like my horse actually hated me because I never liked to stay on the roads. So I'd constantly run through bushes and trees, and the entire time my horse was going, just constantly like, why are you making me hit my face into this bush, you asshole?
That was the aspect that I liked the most that I didn't expect to, because along with every other meter in the game and the 15-second looting of every body, I thought, the horse thing, well, interesting in the beginning. It's like, well, this will pay off in a game mechanic, but not in any story way, not in any meaningful fashion in that direction. It'll just make the horse better, whatever. Like, that's great. And instead, it had this really interesting and poignant story beat that I thought was one of the game's biggest strengths. Didn't anticipate that in the early going because I thought, again, well, it's just going to be like my stamina meter. As I get my stamina meter longer, I can run more. As I get bonded with my horse, it does more for me. Okay, fine.
And again, I got this horse at the beginning of the game, White Arabian. I went out of my way to find this guy. Bonded. Geralt of Horsia was his name or her name. I don't remember. And
they're very bonded, though.
Well done.
Super bonded, best friend. And he was in the middle of the game's best. I mean, easily the best arc of like this game and the first game and any Rockstar game. Actually, I would say. The ending, like 5 to 10 hours when you go and you're sniping to get, and there's a song that plays, and the song over the course of like hours continues to build on itself, and it's like I was so hyped.
Yeah, it was riveting. It was such, like you said, the last 5 to 10 hours when Arthur's going to collect debts and he's just like, never mind, just go, leave. I'm not taking your debt. And he kicks the debt collector guy out, like, basically kicks him out like, you're an asshole. You're a terrible person for giving people, making people live this way. I mean, all that came from, obviously, it started unknowingly to us with him getting coughed on, like you said. And the comparison I make to this, and again, this is kind of just maybe a stretch of comparison, is that minor moment in a game paying off much debt later down the road is very similar to the pancake scene in Persona 5 for me, where that very minor thing, boom, all of a sudden, huge meaning later in the game that most people are going to miss on their first time through. And I didn't even know, like, he got tuberculosis. I'm like, oh, that sucks. I mean, I guess he just got it throughout the course of the game. And Shaun texted me, he's like, wait, what about the scene where the guy coughed? And I'm like, what scene? What are you talking about? I forgot all about it because it was so inconsequential in the moment.
I think that Persona scene is an important comparison, though, because while that one is silly with its pancake usage and whatnot, it's been turned into kind of a meme, and that's fine. One of my biggest pet peeves with storytelling is when they don't show and they only tell. Even though that was a minute detail, at least it was something you had the chance to pick up on in both cases, where you could like, but that maybe, you don't immediately make the connection then, but you think, well, that was kind of weird. And then later on, you have the opportunity to be like, oh, that connects back to this thing. Instead of the game just being like, oh, yeah, you were coughed on 3 months ago, and now you have TB. Yes, you couldn't have done anything. It happened.
Yeah, exactly. And that's exactly right. In Persona, you could have done a thing where you show a cutscene that the audience had never seen of why they pick up on this thing. Same could have done with Red Dead. Is like, yeah, you were told later, but they give you the opportunity to connect the dots yourself, and that's awesome.
And even if you don't, you then there's usually that scenario where you can look back on it. Like in Persona, it's actually just flashed back at that time where you go, oh, this was that scene that happened. So you can at least remember it and be like, oh, like I didn't even catch that then, but that was there. So you see the groundwork being laid in a way that some games just don't do very well. Again, maybe it's not so direct as like a scene that you couldn't have seen possibly showing up, but give me those moments, because if I do put the connection together, I feel vindicated and smart. And if I don't, I go, wow, cool, look at this thing you built 15 hours ago that paid off later.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously I've been singing this game's praises for a long time. I really very much enjoyed it.
Criticize it.
Yeah, so I got a couple criticisms. One, some of the mechanics in the gameplay, like Chris mentioned, like looting taking 15 seconds. I understand the realism that comes from that.
Terrible decision.
15 dead bodies on the floor. I kind of want to get the money and supplies and guns from them. And meanwhile, if you're in the middle of a mission, you're trying to loot them, and all your companions are like, "Come on, Arthur! Arthur, come on!
Yeah,
Arthur, don't make me leave you behind." Like,
and then you fail sometimes, actually.
Yes.
That was honestly the last straw. It was one thing if you made me do it, but to have people yell at me constantly and then make me redo content over wanting to collect stuff like a hoarder, like every video game does, I was like, this has no place in a game that I would enjoy. It's a really minor complaint. Don't get me wrong. It wasn't like it detracted from my experience hugely, but when I look back on that, it leaves a bad taste in my mouth, undeniably.
I understand, and I think the reason they went for it was they wanted a bit of that realism, that immersiveness. It's like, hey, you're going to have to actually do this. But really, it is still a video game, and you should have a little bit more quicker animation on that.
I almost just don't like take out looting. Almost like if you're going to have it take so long, if you're going to incentivize not doing it, and if you're going to give enough money throughout the course of the campaign anyway, more than enough. Like just take it out then, or make it faster. One of the two, but don't put it in and make it take forever.
Well, and especially you have no idea what's in there. Like some guy has 25 cents on him, and some guy has $5 on him. You know, that's a significant difference in this game. So it's kind of like it's worthwhile to loot everybody because you're gonna get, you know, all of a sudden you get a full bottle of health tonic. It's like, oh, well, that's valuable. This guy has $5. This guy has 32 cents. It's like, oh, well. Fuck, I didn't need that.
This guy's got like 30 bullets. This guy's got 2. Well, yeah, great. Exactly. I'm glad of the 3 people I managed to loot in time before Dutch yelled at me for the 5,000th time. I got a guy with 2 bullets. Thanks a lot. Feels great.
Another complaint, gutting poker. Like, just making poker completely worthless. It was really sad for me because in Red Dead 1, having poker in there actually being a pretty good little poker simulator. It wasn't fantastic, but it was fun. You feel like you could actually win money that made a difference. And they had the cheating mechanic in 1 as well, which I thought was interesting. I was never very good at it, but it was interesting at least. And then 2, all of a sudden you're playing 1 cent, 2 cent poker, which I get when you're in your camp. Like that, okay, fine. You want realism? You have camp? Sure, guys are playing 1 cent, 2 cent poker. That's fine. But you can't even go to a high stakes game that's playing like $1, $2, and you have $2,000, you know, a couple $100 or something like that. They don't even have that aspect of it, and it's slow as molasses.
Yeah. Yep.
Come on.
Yep.
This isn't the World Series of Poker game. This isn't trying to realism poker. Get through this thing. Come on.
I honestly think that's a non-small part of why I like 1 more than 2, which is ridiculous, I will admit. But as a big-time
like
poker fan, yeah, I really enjoy that aspect of 1. I probably played 10 to 15 hours of poker in 1. That's probably like a fourth of my gameplay in the first game. So to have it be both neutered and made worse in 2, it's like, when I think about all the time I wasted on 2, again, poker's a side quest at best. If anything, it's almost like an optional activity. So it's not really fair, but I'm like, looting bodies, eating mechanics, long travel that wasn't always satisfactory. When I'm with somebody and I'm getting the story, I have no qualm with the travel. When I'm going across the fucking map and I have nothing to do to fill that time, too much. And then the slow-ass poker where it's like, it takes like 15 seconds in between hands. And it's like, this is a video game. I don't need you to allot time to scoop up the cards and shuffle them and deal them out. That's not a level of realism I need in my video game. It's why I'm playing a video game, because I don't want the realism. It's a stupidly small thing to be upset about, but I was legitimately very disappointed in that. It's like you had it fine in 1. If anything, make it better. Even if it had been identical, I've been like, cool, I'm going to put more time into this. It was worse, and I don't get it.
Yeah, and I even enjoyed the other games. I don't enjoy the 5-finger fillet game because, I mean, even just watching the knife hit somebody's hand, I'm like, why would you ever do this?
Yeah.
But like dominoes, that was fun. I like the fact that there were dominoes in there. It was fun. Like you felt like a little bit more of a bond with Tilly playing dominoes. I thought that was kind of a fun aspect of the game.
Still a little bit slow, but I liked it.
Yeah, it was. It could have been faster, but still, it was at least fun. One of my simultaneous likes and dislikes was related to the long travels. They tried to make some of the long traveling better by having the random events on the side of the road, like the guy,
Stupid.
the 17 guys that you have to suck the poison out of their legs, type of thing.
Yeah.
But and then other random events and just weird little mini things where you run into a guy getting attacked by wolves, you fight the wolves off, and you can either give him medicine or whiskey. Try to give him medicine, and he slaps it away. He goes, "You asshole! This isn't gonna help me," and he dies. It's like, oh, well, I tried. And so there's just little things to do, which I like that program because again, it makes it immersive. But simultaneously, I had a couple where I'd ride by him and hear somebody yelling, and I'd turn around and I couldn't find him, and it's like, shit, like what did I miss? I feel like I missed something in this game that I could play for 200 hours and not complete everything. I don't know, it's a little bit of a complaint just having the ability not to do everything or miss things so easily.
Yeah, I do. With the things taking time, it's a complaint for me too. So I had a workaround. I don't know if you guys did, because it's kind of annoying, but there's a way to put yourself, if you're going, what is it, you can always travel to the camp, no, from the camp to a city that you've been to. You can't travel back to the camp.
You can.
No, you can't. Well, no, it only goes one way. Whatever it is, it only goes one way.
You can. Once you enable the fast travel from the camp, if you set up your own camp in the middle, you can fast travel just like you did in Red Dead 1.
Was it patched later then, maybe?
Maybe.
Because I remember that being a significant complaint at release, which is when me and Shaun both played it, but maybe they got such feedback on it that they took... I haven't followed it since then, so maybe they actually got rid of that.
There
because
was no fast travel. You can fast travel from the main camp, and that was it. So anytime to go back to camp...
Yeah, you had to ride back.
You're riding, and so I would set it up you can do the cinematic camera, and he just follows the road on the path. I just put the controller down and read a book. And I was thinking to myself, that's a fine workaround. But if I'm doing that, just fucking build in fast travel.
Yeah.
If you're gonna allow me to do it and still put the controller down for 5 to 10 minutes at a time, just allow me to fast travel. And if somebody wants pure immersion, great, they can get it. They don't have to use it.
I did that a few times where I would put the controller down, like you said, and I'd be looking at my phone or reading something, and all of a sudden I'd hear someone going, "Help me, help me!" I'm like, smash the button, no, I gotta go help.
Wait.
So you're a good person. I wouldn't let that deter me. But every once in a while I would hear a smash and then a oh
yeah. That was my favorite.
Arthur careening over the front of the horse.
Because people are such bad drivers out on the roads, which I usually thought was funny. I know some people were annoyed by that. I thought it was great.
And then they get mad at me. Yeah. And then they try to kill me, even though they cut me off.
Mm-hmm. And you kill them in self-defense, but that's going to make you wanted now, so you have to kill all the witnesses. And it's like, this was just a road interaction.
Yeah. And then a lot of times I would shoot one, and then the rest would leave. And Arthur would be riding away. He's like, I'm just playing with you. It's like, Arthur, you killed 3 of them.
That's not playing. Well, if they did patch that, good on them, because that was one of my biggest complaints about, too, was that when I look back on my playtime, which was something like, 45, 50 hours, I'm like, 20% of this was wasted.
Yeah.
And it's a shame because the other 80% of it is really, really good, especially, like I said, the last 5 to 10 hours of the main story, the end of the epilogue. There's some really, really top tier, 10 out of 10 stuff in here. But I also think about that bloat, and I'm like, ugh.
I love you can't fast travel. Every game has this, but you can't fast travel a place you haven't been.
Sure.
Perfect. That
Great.
makes sense.
Yeah. Make me explore.
I love, like you said, if there's a character, you're getting dialogue or some value. I love that. I did that in Red Dead 1. I would just ride, even though you could fast travel. If there's dialogue, I don't want to miss it.
And like you said, it's skippable for the people who don't care about it.
Yeah.
If you just want to get to your destination and you don't want the extra scenes, you could do that. I think you're missing out. But give us the option. Same thing with the fast travel. If we want to ride back ourselves, we can always do that. But if we're not looking to play a 70-hour game, let's put some other mechanisms in place.
Mm-hmm.
Overall, I loved it. I really did. I thought it was great. But to me, to some people, it was great because of the bloat and because the bloat equated for them immersion. For me, it was great in spite of the bloat.
Yeah.
And I think that's the difference.
Yeah. Well, there was a good line. There's a line of it. Immersion was good. Too much immersion bad. That type of thing.
That's how I feel. Yeah.
A complaint I had was I didn't feel it was easy or possible to play like the renegade type of play, the dishonorable type of play, basically, because of what you just mentioned about the witness system where it was set up. I like that system overall. I think it's interesting where it's like you commit a crime and then some guy's gonna go tell on you and you gotta go chase him down and either convince him not to tell on you or kill him. But it's way too easy to just be like, oh, I accidentally ran into you. Now I had to kill the entire town because I don't want to have a bounty on me.
I think that says more about you than the game.
I guess. And then of course you can fix the fact that you lost a bunch of honor points by walking by a bunch of people and going, howdy.
That's the most hilarious thing
Yeah.
to me. It's like, okay, I've killed an old woman, but I've tipped my hat to enough people to where
Good enough.
It's a
Balance it
wash.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it was frustrating, especially as I was still getting the hang of the controls in the beginning, because I went through an entire mission, like completed it, but I hadn't gotten back yet, so it hadn't saved, and I accidentally fired my weapon in town, which then sent people like scurrying and stuff, and it was like, well, and I couldn't stop them all. I wasn't trying to kill anybody, so I couldn't like appease them. So now I'm wanted at the end of a mission, and I'm like, but it was accidental. This must happen to other people, in the Old West, like accidental discharges and shit, but. Like I said, overall, I like the system. Occasionally, you're like,
So that's the thing, Chris. And like, we know a person who would argue, well, in real life, if you did that on accident, you'd have the same result. To which I would argue, accidentally firing in a video game is a lot different than me physically reaching into my fucking pocket, pulling out a gun and blowing it into the air.
Yeah.
Like, you can't equate the two things.
You know what doesn't match between my experience and the game's experience? I don't have tuberculosis. I'm going to be just fine at the end of this. So why
also
is he
true.
dying? So yeah, that doesn't fly with me. I understand the intent behind it. I'm not like dense, but no.
Yeah.
What would you score it, Dave?
Oh, I have one last complaint.
Oh,
One last
sure.
Sorry, one last one. And then I'll give a score. The very, very last scene. Love the mission of John and Sadie and Charles. Charles is one of my favorite characters. I can't believe I mentioned him. Loved Charles the entire game. Thought he was a fantastic character. Glad he survived. But going up, you're in the final, gun showdown standoff with Dutch and Micah and John. Great. Love that scene. I didn't feel that there was a smoking gun type of moment that made Dutch make the decision to shoot Micah instead of you, except for a bit of loyalty to John, but he had loyalty to Micah the entire time, so much so that he was in his camp up in the mountains. Like, Dutch coming out when you're chasing down Micah was a shock where it's like, oh shit, Dutch is there. Now what's going to happen? And then Dutch ends up shooting Micah. I didn't feel that was very authentic because of what happens in one later on. And then also, he was so loyal to Micah, why would he turn on all of a sudden?
Well, I have two things. Didn't he find out that Micah was the rat?
He didn't want to believe it.
Okay. I feel like it's a mix of finally accepting that was probably the case, and but to be honest with you, it kind of left me scratching my head, but like not in a bad way. I was like, oh, that's perfect Dutch, just doing Dutch things.
Yeah.
Like, why did he shoot him? Who fucking knows? The guy's crazy. And I think that, if anything, that shows you how volatile he is like he would be with them and then all of a sudden just change his mind.
Yeah, it's true. So maybe it is fitting in the character. I just wish there was a little bit more. There's no dialogue in that last scene from Dutch. I wish he had just a little bit more dialogue of like, confronting Micah about being the rat, basically, and that would have solved it. Like, that would have done it for me. But it just missing something, I think. Although it led to one of the most satisfying moments, which was pumping Micah full of lead when you got the Red Dead scene, where you're just like, this is so much more satisfying than the end of one, where you try to pick off as many army men as you can. This one, I focus all on one person. I think I put 20 different bullets in him,
which is great.
Yeah, so satisfying.
Yeah, but again, the road to get there was too long. Like,
Yeah.
Like John's epilogue is like 15 hours.
It's a waste of time.
And you're like, great, I'm so happy to. Now, if you're just like, you're in love with John, I guess you could like that. But
I
I'm
love
thinking,
John.
do like an hour or two of the house, an hour or two, whatever, and then wrap that thing up. 5 hours is all that needed, and they stretched it to like 15.
I already got playing John on the Farm Life Simulator. It was called Red Dead Redemption 1.
Yeah.
So why the fuck am I doing it again in 2? So I can have Abigail bend my ear with complaints for another 15 hours? Get the fuck out of here with that.
I did like some of the scenes of showing how he got the farm. I liked those scenes.
Yeah.
However, when I have to hit X to hit the hammer, it's a little much.
It's the whole thing's like it's the bloat again. That epilogue could have been a third of the time and still have been just as impactful and given you some of that stuff of like, oh yeah, this is how we got to here, and seeing more of them together before the events of one. Like that's all fine, but then I'm like, what am I doing? Why did you put this in here?
And it was, if that was a DLC, fine. Make
Sure.
it 15, 20 hours.
Stretch
make
it a
me
bit.
do the monotony thing.
Yeah.
But like it wasn't his story. And so to do a little bit of an epilogue that closes the gap, I think is fine. But it felt really weird to me to spend so much time on something like Red Dead 2 is not about John.
Mm-hmm.
It just felt weird and overlong to me.
Yeah. So score. I will give this. I think I will end up giving it a 9.5 because loved it. Loved a lot of it. I enjoyed it. It was compelling. Little anecdote. I first started playing this game when my mother-in-law was in town, and she's seen me play video games before and like been like, oh, I don't fucking care. Like I played Fallout or Mass Effect. She's like, I don't care about the sci-fi stuff. She was enthralled with it at the beginning of the game because it was a Western, had interesting characters. She was enthralled. She called me a couple weeks later. I was like, hey, how's that game going? Like, what's going on with Arthur? I was like, what?
Don't
You're
tell her he has tuberculosis. It'll break her heart.
He went to live on a farm.
So I ended up telling him like, well, lots of shit happened. Lots of shit has happened. So love the game. The bloat, the extra bit, a little bit just too much going on at the end. I think it's really the bloat that detracts from it a little bit. Like they could have cleaned up a bit of it and still made an extremely immersive game, but that kind of keeps it from having that perfect rating, I think.
The first 4/7 of this game was like 7 for me, I would say 7.5 probably. Like good. I mean, clearly you can see the quality and the craftsmanship. I just wasn't particularly enjoying it. The last 3/7 were excellent, and so the fact that my score falls to a 9, I think is pretty good. It overcame the things that I really didn't like because of the strengths of what it did well.
I'll go like 8.5, and I confess it's probably too low, but it's my score.
I don't know how you can give it a 10. Like,
yeah,
No.
and that's the thing. Like Metal Gear Solid 5, you can't give that a 10. It wasn't a complete story. Red Dead 2, you can't give it a 10 because there's too much wrong with it. Like there's too many flaws.
And I think we've talked about this in the past, and it's like I don't expect a 10 to be a perfect game. I just don't. If it can have a couple of small flaws, because I think a perfect game is almost impossible now with as big as they've gotten. But it can't have like a glaring flaw and still be a 10.
Mm-hmm.
I think that devalues the 10 too much.
Yeah, exactly, and that's why I mean I love so much about this game, and maybe because I had the patch where I could fast travel back to camp or back to different cities, that helped the experience a lot. And that's why like I can give it up to a 9.5. I can't give it that perfect score though. It's just what it has done for me though is Rockstar's open world games. I'm buying the day they come out now. Grand Theft Auto 5, I absolutely loved. I love the open world. I love the creativity. I love the depth. Red Dead Redemption 2 is the same type of deal, and Rockstar has just made it where like I have to buy your game when it comes out at this point because you do such a fantastic job.
I agree with you on Red Dead 3.
Well,
That's about it. I will maybe play Grand Theft Auto 6.
I'll play it.
I spent the entire time in Grand Theft Auto 5 being like, okay, how many missions do I have now until the end of the game? And I was like counting because it was fine, but like there was no moment in Grand Theft Auto 5 that even came close to the stuff that I loved in Red Dead 2. Not even close. Grand Theft Auto 5 is interesting, but it is not emotionally. It does not elicit any emotions from me.
No, and that's the difference of why I have almost so much respect for Rockstar is telling two completely different stories. One full of satire, which is Grand Theft Auto 5, which is just poking fun at modern society while killing a bunch of people in a game, and then this heartfelt, passionate story of a guy learning to live with what he's dealt with and meeting these people along the way and dealing with death right in his face. Like, this is the same company making these two different games, granted, different writing teams, whatever, but wow.
Well, not really. I mean, I'm sure teams, yes, but like they share a lot of the big writers, and actually, two of them have left the company now, and everybody's like, "Oh, that's the end of Rockstar." And I was like, I don't know. Like it's pretty sharp, the writing, but like again, Grand Theft Auto 5 was like meh. So if they get another writing team, that actually might be fine.
Dangerous road, though. Sometimes those 2 or 3 core people will make up more of the experience than we thought, like a few different key people leaving BioWare, and then what happened with the most recent Mass Effect game.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
I'm with you. I don't think that's a storm that's going to shake everything to its core, but it's possible it is, and we won't find out until whenever the hell Grand Theft Auto 6 comes out.
We're never going to get a Grand Theft Auto 6 anyway. It's all going to be online from now on.
Well, that's the problem, is that Red Dead 2 Online and Grand Theft Auto 5 Online has ruined the sequels because people keep playing this shit. I tried to log on to Grand Theft Auto Online just to see how it was. I don't want any part of that. It's so massively huge. You spend so much money. Nothing. I want no part of that game. Nothing.
I don't blame you. I've seen some humorous videos and fun exploits in it, but it doesn't interest me as a player almost at all.
Well, friend of the show, Kevin Hauk. I like friend of the show. He's just like, he's a friend. But
I like saying friend of the show. It's a great phrase.
yeah, he plays it to grief people. 90% of why he plays Red Dead Online is to grief people. That's fine. That doesn't interest me at all.
No.
I don't want to grief. I don't want to be griefed. And so just give me the single player stuff.
Yep.
I don't even mind griefing NPCs. I kind of get a kick out of, like, in Grand Theft Auto,
Yeah.
running over people and, like, parking my car on top of strippers and whatever. But I wouldn't want to do it to other players because then I know they're not having any fun, and then I'm an empath, so I'm like, I'm not having any fun. I'm supposed to be having fun. That's the whole point. Now, the producer is angrily looking at his watch, but real quick, we have to address 2 things. 1, do you like the order that we had you play it in, Dave? We did this
Yes.
because of the gameplay, which was going to seem really slow if you started with 2 and go back to 1, but considering that 2 is a prequel, do you like having played 1 first and then played 2?
So yes, I think overall I prefer the fact that I played 1 because I felt a little bit more towards John. I like some of the callbacks or call forwards, I guess is probably how you'd say. Some things that you see brewing and kind of putting those pieces together. I will say the experience of playing 1 after 2, if you didn't play 1 first, would be so much more emotional. Being John chasing down Javier and Bill and Dutch, that final showdown with Dutch in 1 didn't feel nearly as impactful as it would had I played 2 first.
Yeah.
Because if I played 2 first and then played 1, I'd be like, oh shit, finally I'm taking down this asshole.
Well,
in 1, he wasn't even
Yeah.
introduced till 3/4 into the game.
Mm-hmm.
I was glad Chris had you play 1 because I was never going to say play 2 and then 1, but I would have said, skip 1. That's fine. But I think you're better for playing 1.
Yeah, I agree. And it would have been very difficult to go to 1 after playing 2.
Oh, yeah. That,
Just
I
the
wouldn't have
gameplay
even
itself.
recommended that.
Ground-
Although you might have wanted to because you like 2 so much, but it worked out the way that it did. I think it was good. So we're at the end of the show, Chris?
Yeah.
Okay. I want to spend some time next week because I still have homework, right? We still have the homework. That's still going to happen at some point. Then we have the Final Fantasy VI retrospective that we want to do. But I want to spend some time advocating. I want to debate on air, which is a really funny debate because I don't think Chris and I particularly care about who wins, but that's fine. We'll pretend like we do. Trying to sway Dave's next game. And I think it's just interesting. It can be interesting for the audience to hear what games we want to play and why, or we want Dave to play and why. So that might be. I'd like to start off next show by doing that.
So it means, Dave, you don't get to play shit for the next week.
It's fine. I probably could use the break. Actually, I've been playing more shrines on Breath of the Wild lately, just trying to get all the shrines. I'm up
There
to
you
95,
go.
So.
Perfect fluff.
And if you want to play one of my games, you're gonna have to borrow it from me anyway. So there's no rush.
Sure. I need to give you back a couple of your games too.
Yeah, you
actually,
fucking
so.
do.
Is it my Persona 5 you have or his? I don't even remember anymore.
Yes, I have Shaun's.
Okay. All right. That's right, guys. I think we were still maybe playing it for the YouTube channel at the time or something.
Yeah.
Alrighty. Well, that's the end of this episode. Next week, you've already heard the layout for what might happen. JK about the homework. We're never going to get to it. It's been like 10 weeks. But we definitely will at some point. I think it's interesting. It's just things keep popping up. The world's a busy place, even though it's all shut down right now. In between episodes, you can find us at our website, objectionnetwork.com, or at youtube.com/objectionnetwork for new videos 7 days a week. We will see you next time.